that healthy grocery cart might be hiding dangers. From heavy metals in chocolate to bacteria in produce, seniors are paying the highest price. One snack, one frozen bag, one safe label can mean hospitalization, or worse. Today, we'll expose 9 grocery items seniors must avoid and reveal 2 that are actually safe to keep on your shelf. Coming in at number 9, we've got bagged salad mixes, the shortcut that promises a healthy bowl in seconds, but has repeatedly carried listeria from plant to plate. You open a crisp bag labeled pre-washed, ready to eat, tell yourself you're making a smart choice, and tuck it into the fridge. That label feels like a stamp of safety until the recall notice or headline says otherwise. In 2015, Dole's processing plant in Springfield, Ohio, was linked to a listeria outbreak that spread across multiple states and into Canada. At least 33 people were hospitalized and 4 died. In 2021, Fresh Express recalled packaged Caesar and garden mixes nationwide after listeria sickened people in 13 states. Those weren't hypothetical risks. Those were real seniors in hospitals and families burying loved ones. When contamination starts in a plant, a single slip spreads into tens of thousands of bags shipped across grocery chains in half the country. What makes this worse for older adults is listeria's unusual biology. Unlike many foodborne germs, it can grow at refrigerator temperatures. Freezing slows most bacteria. Refrigeration suppresses many others. But listeria keeps multiplying even while your lettuce sits in the crisper. A bag that was only slightly contaminated on day 1 can be much riskier on day 4. In CDC investigations, seniors made up the majority of severe cases, with high hospitalization rates and several deaths. Behind the scenes, the pathway is often mechanical and preventable. A washing tank not fully sanitized, pooled drainage near a conveyor, or lettuce heads blended from multiple farms. Because salad mixes are batch mixed, contamination from one crate of romaine or spinach gets distributed across countless packages. That's why recalls are sweeping. They hit supermarket chains nationwide. For seniors, the lesson is practical. A whole head of romaine or kale you wash yourself carries less mass exposure risk than a factory mixed bag. If you do buy bagged salads, use them the day you purchase them. And always check recall alerts from the FDA, USDA, or CDC, which post them online in real time. Convenience is handy, but when the factory floor slips, you're gambling with a product that has already put hundreds of people in the hospital. Ever opened a ready-to-eat bag that smelled sour, turned slimy early, or carried an off taste? That's not just spoilage. It's a reminder of how fragile safety really is. A single contamination point at a salad plant can end up in crisper drawers in every state. For seniors, that's not just an inconvenience. It's a life-threatening risk. Ready to eat should mean safe to eat. History shows that with bagged salads, that isn't always the case. Landing at number 8, we've got frozen berries, the smoothie shortcut that has been tied to multiple hepatitis A outbreaks and major recalls over the last decade. On paper, frozen fruit is a no-brainer. Long shelf life, easy to blend, and priced well. In practice, frozen berries have surfaced in outbreak investigations more than once. Public health agencies have linked hepatitis A cases to imported frozen strawberries in 2016, and again to frozen organic strawberries imported from Baja California in 2022 to 2023, leading to recalls and warnings from the FDA and CDC. Those investigations showed that contaminated fruit entered wide distribution and ended up in home freezers and restaurant kitchens, exposing people who ate the fruit without cooking it. For seniors, who are often less resilient to prolonged viral illness, those reports are a real red flag. Hepatitis A spreads when food or water becomes contaminated with fecal material carrying the virus. The contamination usually happens before the fruit reaches the store, at the farm, during packing, or in transport, and the virus survives freezing. That's the critical point. Freezing preserves the virus, so a bag of frozen berries can carry an infectious dose months after harvest. People who blend those berries raw into smoothies or thaw them for desserts effectively skip a cooking step that would inactivate the virus. In outbreak follow-ups, investigators often point to a common supplier or farm as the source, which explains why many brands or retail labels can be affected by a single contaminated shipment. For seniors and caregivers, the practical takeaway is that raw use of frozen berries raises avoidable risk. Cooking or boiling the berries before eating kills hepatitis A. That's what public health notices repeatedly stress when outbreaks occur. When you see a recall notice, Follow the instructions from the FDA and CDC, throw the product away, or return it per the company's guidance. And if anyone who ate the product within the exposure window is unvaccinated, call a healthcare provider about post-exposure vaccination or immune globulin. Those are not alarmist steps. They reflect how public health prevents single events from turning into larger clusters. Have you ever made a raw berry smoothie and felt uneasy afterward? Tell us, did you notice any symptoms or a recall later on? Your experience helps other viewers understand how common these scares can be. A contaminated harvest can hide in freezers across the country, and a raw smoothie is the fastest way to spread that risk into your morning cup. Frozen fruit is convenient, but when the record shows repeated hepatitis A links, seniors should cook or skip the raw berry habit. Moving to number 7, we've got canned tuna, the budget-friendly protein that fills millions of sandwiches and salads every week, but also carries a long-term risk, mercury accumulation, which matters most for older adults. Tuna has plenty going for it. It's lean, high in protein, and provides omega-3 fats. But not all tuna is equal when it comes to mercury. According to FDA testing, albacore, labeled white tuna, contains about 3 times more mercury than canned light tuna, which usually comes from skipjack. That's why the EPA and FDA's joint advisory recommends limiting albacore to no more than 1 serving, about 6 ounces, per week, while canned light tuna can be eaten up to 2 to 3 times a week. These limits aren't diet trivia. They're safeguards designed to reduce long-term harm to the brain and kidneys. For older adults, the concern is cumulative exposure. Mercury is a neurotoxin. It interferes with memory, attention, and processing speed. While public health messaging often emphasizes pregnant women and children, the same risk pathway applies to seniors. A 2017 Consumer Reports analysis found that some canned tuna samples contained mercury levels double the FDA's average estimate, underscoring that brand and batch variation makes exposure unpredictable. Over years of repeated intake, that uncertainty can add up to real problems for cognitive health. This isn't a call to banish tuna from the pantry, it's about treating it like a dosage. Rotate proteins so tuna isn't the daily fallback. Use canned light tuna for regular meals, and keep albacore as an occasional choice. When you want a fish that's both rich in omega-3s and low in mercury, go for salmon, sardines, or trout. That's the balance clinicians recommend. Seafood for its heart and brain benefits, but with attention to species and serving frequency. So here's the practical takeaway. Canned tuna is tasty, cheap, and convenient. But if it's on your plate multiple times a week, the mercury math adds up over the years. Dose it wisely, prefer light tuna for everyday use, and make albacore the exception instead of the routine. Do you reach for light tuna every week, or is albacore your default for salads? Share how often you eat it, and let's compare notes. Arriving at number 6, we've got deli meats, the cold cuts that fill sandwiches from diners to family kitchens, but also carry one of the most persistent foodborne risks for seniors, Listeria monocytogenes. Sliced ham, turkey, bologna, salami, roast beef. The variety looks safe behind glass or pre-packed in neat plastic. The trouble is that Listeria doesn't care whether meat is seasoned, smoked, or vacuum sealed. It thrives in cold environments, including the same refrigerators people trust to keep food safe. That makes deli meats one of the rare foods that can act as a long-term host for contamination instead of being slowed down by chilling. And this isn't just theory. In 1998, one of the largest Listeria outbreaks in U.S. history was traced to Bilmar Foods, a subsidiary of Sara Lee. Hot dogs and deli meats from a Michigan plant sickened over 100 people in 22 states and killed at least 14. Most of them seniors. In 2020, another multi-state outbreak linked to deli meats hospitalized nearly every one of the 12 confirmed patients, with all 3 fatalities being adults over 65. Smaller but steady clusters happen almost every year. Between 1998 and 2018, the CDC linked over 1,600 listeriosis cases to ready-to-eat meats, with a fatality rate around 20%, far higher than most foodborne pathogens. For older adults, the risks are magnified. A younger, healthy person might fight off Listeria with mild stomach upset, but seniors are more likely to experience invasive listeriosis, where the bacteria escape the gut and move into the bloodstream or nervous system. That means sepsis, meningitis, or, in many cases, death. CDC surveillance shows that 1 in 5 seniors infected with Listeria from deli meats does not survive. Pregnant women are another high-risk group, but for seniors, the rate of hospitalization and death is particularly stark. And the problem isn't confined to small corner delis. Major brands have faced recalls, not just for products sliced in local shops, but for sealed packages sold nationwide. Sometimes contamination starts on slicers and cutting boards that aren't fully sanitized. Other times it happens in the processing plant, where a single tainted batch of turkey or ham gets shipped to thousands of stores. Because Listeria can persist in cold, damp environments, drains, slicer blades, storage drawers, it can establish a kind of foothold in a facility. Once that happens, every batch that runs through the line risks contamination. Think about the classic, safe, cold-cut sandwich. Turkey on wheat, maybe with tomato and lettuce. For a senior, that exact meal has been at the center of multiple outbreak warnings. The turkey may have been sliced on a contaminated blade. The lettuce may have come from a batch tied to an outbreak. To the eye, it looks harmless, but you can't see or smell Listeria. One workaround is heat. Cooking deli meats to steaming hot, 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius, before eating dramatically reduces the risk. That's why the CDC, FDA, and USDA specifically advise seniors and people with weakened immunity to reheat cold cuts before eating them. But realistically, most people buy cold cuts for the opposite reason: convenience. Very few want to microwave their ham or roast beef every time they make a sandwich. That's where the personal side of the story comes in. Many seniors and families have already adjusted their habits. After the 2020 outbreak, social media was filled with people saying they stopped buying cold cuts altogether and switched to fresh-cooked meats sliced at home. Others now only eat deli meats when heated in soups, casseroles, or sandwiches pressed on a grill. These aren't fringe habits. They're responses to a food that has repeatedly landed vulnerable people in hospitals. Deli meat looks harmless stacked in the fridge, but for seniors it may be the most dangerous item in the drawer. A single slice might be fine, but history shows that Listeria outbreaks linked to deli meats keep recurring. For older adults, that isn't a background risk. It's a gamble with stakes as high as sepsis, meningitis, and fatal infection. Have you or a family member ever stopped buying cold cuts after a recall? Did you switch to fresh-cooked meats instead? Sharing your habits may help others see how common it is to abandon what used to be a lunchbox staple. Cold cuts should mean easy meals. For seniors, the record shows they can mean something else entirely. Sliding into number 5, we've got plant-based meat alternatives. The burgers, nuggets, and sausages marketed as healthier or more sustainable, but increasingly flagged in recalls for both physical and bacterial hazards. The rise of plant-based meat has been one of the biggest food trends of the last decade. U.S. sales of plant-based meats topped $1.4 billion in 2021. Fueled by brands promising the taste of beef or chicken without the environmental or health drawbacks. Grocery freezers are now lined with patties, grounds, and strips meant to replace traditional proteins. But in the rush to scale, food safety lapses have repeatedly surfaced. In 2022, Beyond Meat recalled thousands of pounds of patties after consumers reported finding hard plastic fragments in frozen burgers. That same year, Impossible Foods was caught in a recall involving mislabeling, where undeclared allergens were present, a serious danger for anyone with soy or wheat allergies. In 2023, a major producer of plant-based chicken nuggets pulled products off shelves after regulators flagged possible Salmonella contamination, warning consumers not to eat them. Even earlier, FDA inspection reports noted problems with unsanitary equipment in some production plants, raising concerns about Listeria exposure. Each notice carried the same stark language: discard immediately and seek medical help if symptoms appear. For seniors, these risks hit especially hard. A healthy adult might ride out a mild case of foodborne illness, but CDC data show that seniors account for a disproportionate share of hospitalizations and deaths in outbreaks involving Salmonella and Listeria. Add the physical hazards. Biting into a stray piece of plastic or metal can mean dental fractures, choking, or even internal injury. In case reviews, it's seniors and children who suffer the worst outcomes because their bodies don't recover from these shocks as easily. The marketing of plant-based meats often leans on clean eating imagery, but the recalls tell a more industrial story. These are highly processed foods made in factories where soy, pea protein, or wheat gluten are ground, blended, extruded, and shaped by machinery. Each stage creates another chance for foreign objects or bacteria to slip in. Bright packaging may show a green field or a rustic skillet, but what's inside has more in common with a factory assembly line. It's worth noting that contamination from foreign objects is relatively rare in traditional cuts of meat. A whole steak or chicken breast doesn't pass through grinding and extrusion equipment, while every mechanical stage in plant-based production increases the odds of contamination. That's why recalls in this category often cite plastic, metal shavings, or even glass fragments, hazards you almost never see in fresh cuts of beef or poultry. Have you ever noticed an odd texture in a plant-based patty, or stopped eating them after hearing about a recall? Your experience could help others realize how often these problems arise. Plant-based meats might look futuristic, but the risks are old-fashioned: bacteria and broken machinery finding their way into your dinner. For seniors, the safest protein swap often comes from less processing, not more. Sometimes the so-called alternative is riskier than the original. Coming in at number 4, we've got imported soft cheeses, camembert, brie, and similar varieties that have repeatedly been tied to deadly Listeria outbreaks. Cheese feels timeless and safe, especially the softer varieties people enjoy at gatherings. But those creamy wedges have been the center of some of the deadliest dairy-linked outbreaks on record. Listeria thrives in soft, moist environments, and soft cheeses provide the perfect breeding ground. Add the complexity of international supply chains, and you have a product that carries unique risks for seniors. Public health investigations confirm the danger. In 2022, brie and camembert sold under several brands were recalled nationwide after Listeria was found in samples. The FDA warned that eating the cheese could lead to severe illness or death, especially in seniors, pregnant women, and those with weakened immune systems. Previous outbreaks have shown the same pattern: imported or specialty cheeses contaminated during production, distributed widely, and consumed by vulnerable populations who often believed they were indulging in a safe treat. Why are these cheeses so risky? The texture and moisture content allow Listeria to survive and grow, even under refrigeration. Unlike hard cheeses, which resist bacterial growth, soft varieties can act as incubators. Imported batches face another hurdle. Inspections are less consistent across borders, and contamination can slip through before reaching U.S. shelves. Once an outbreak is detected, recalls stretch across dozens of brands and retailers, showing just how many different labels can trace back to a single contaminated source. For seniors, the consequences can be catastrophic. Listeria infections from cheese often don't stop at mild digestive symptoms. They can lead to bloodstream infections or meningitis. Hospitalization is common, and deaths are not rare. CDC advisories explicitly warn older adults to avoid soft cheeses made from unpasteurized milk. But even pasteurized soft cheeses have been implicated in outbreaks when factory sanitation fails. The cultural appeal of brie, or camembert, is strong. It's the cheese board centerpiece, the creamy addition to crackers. But for seniors, the indulgence can be a dangerous gamble. Safer alternatives exist. Hard cheeses like cheddar or Swiss are far less likely to harbor Listeria and still deliver flavor without the same bacterial risks. Have you ever been surprised by a recall notice on a cheese you bought? Did it change the way you shop for dairy? That soft slice of brie looks refined, but for seniors it can be a direct line to a hospital bed. Imported soft cheeses may taste sophisticated, but when health agencies keep linking them to deadly outbreaks, seniors should think twice before adding them to the cart. At number 3, we've got apple cinnamon fruit pouches, the squeezable snacks that look like a safe, kid-friendly option, but recently shocked the nation when testing revealed extreme levels of lead contamination. For years, fruit pouches have been marketed as convenient, healthy, and mess-free. They appeal to parents, caregivers, and even seniors looking for an easy, on-the-go snack. But in 2023, the FDA and CDC confirmed what independent labs had raised alarms about. Several brands of cinnamon-flavored apple pouches contained lead at levels hundreds of times higher than what's considered safe. Some samples tested over 200 times the legal limit, sparking one of the largest recall alerts in recent memory. Why is lead so dangerous? For children, it damages brain development and behavior. For seniors, the risks are different but no less serious. Chronic lead exposure is linked to kidney damage, cardiovascular disease, and neurological decline. An older adult already managing blood pressure or cognitive health issues can experience sharper deterioration if exposed to lead-tainted food. The scary part is that symptoms may not appear right away. Lead builds up in the body silently, making it one of the most insidious contaminants. The investigation found that the contamination came from the cinnamon supply chain. In poorly regulated environments, spices are sometimes adulterated with lead-containing substances to boost weight or color. That contamination carried over into the final pouches. Once they hit store shelves, families and seniors bought them in good faith, never suspecting that a snack labeled as wholesome fruit could be laced with heavy metals. The fallout was swift. Dozens of children tested positive for elevated lead levels, prompting parents across the country to check pantries and discard products. But less discussed was how many older adults rely on fruit pouches as an easy-to-digest option when appetite or chewing becomes difficult. Seniors who consumed these products regularly may have unknowingly exposed themselves to dangerous levels of lead for weeks before the recall. Consider the psychology here. Food packaging often markets to trust. The labels show fresh apples, a sprinkle of cinnamon, maybe a green leaf to symbolize health. Now imagine that behind that glossy design sits a toxic contaminant with no taste, no smell, no immediate giveaway. That's why this item earns the #1 spot, not just because of the contamination itself, but because it shattered the illusion of safety in one of the most innocent-looking foods. For seniors, the takeaway is simple but sobering. Fruit pouches are not worth the risk. Safer alternatives like whole fruit, applesauce from trusted brands, or even canned fruit and juice provide the same nutrition without the hidden danger. The convenience of a squeeze pouch can't outweigh the possibility of toxic metals entering your system. When the FDA says lead levels are 200 times the legal limit, that's not a snack. That's a health hazard in a plastic pouch. Coming in at #2, we've got sprouts, alfalfa, clover, mung bean, and the rest. They look like a healthy choice, crisp, fresh, and packed with nutrients, but sprouts have been repeatedly linked to Salmonella and E. coli outbreaks. The problem comes from how they're grown. Sprouts need warm, damp conditions to sprout quickly, and those exact conditions are also perfect for bacteria to multiply. If the seed itself is contaminated before sprouting begins, the bacteria can grow right inside the sprout as it develops. By the time it reaches your plate, washing won't remove the bacteria because it isn't just on the surface, it's throughout the sprout. Outbreak investigations have shown that one contaminated seed lot can lead to multiple outbreaks across states, because sprouting facilities often source seeds from the same suppliers. Once contaminated sprouts reach restaurants or grocery stores, they end up in salads, wraps, and sandwiches served widely, spreading the risk quickly. For older adults, the consequences are much more serious. Infections that might cause mild stomach upset in a younger person can result in hospitalization or worse. The advice from the CDC and FDA is straightforward. Seniors and people with weaker immune systems should avoid eating raw sprouts altogether. If you really like the taste and crunch, cooking them until they're steaming hot kills the bacteria. Otherwise, swap them for safer crunchy additions like cucumber slices, shredded carrots, or bell peppers. Have you ever avoided a sandwich or salad because it had sprouts on it? Do you remove them or skip the dish entirely? Finally, at #1, we've got unpasteurized juices, apple cider, orange juice, and other fresh-pressed varieties. They often taste fresher and sometimes get marketed as all-natural, but unpasteurized juices are tied to outbreaks of E. coli, Salmonella, and even norovirus. The risk comes from the way fruit is grown and processed. Fruit can pick up bacteria from soil, water, or animal droppings in the orchard. Even fruit that looks clean can carry bacteria on the skin, which gets transferred into the juice when pressed. If the juice isn't pasteurized, a quick heating step that kills dangerous microbes, those bacteria survive and go straight into the bottle. Outbreaks linked to unpasteurized cider and juice have sickened children, seniors, and entire families because these drinks are consumed cold without any cooking to reduce bacteria. Seniors face higher risk because their immune systems are less able to fight off severe infections, and what starts as stomach cramps can escalate to serious illness. The practical choice is simple. Buy pasteurized juices. Most juices sold in grocery stores are pasteurized, and they'll be labeled as such. If you're buying from a farm stand, juice bar, or small vendor, always ask if it's pasteurized. If it isn't, you can skip it or heat it yourself before drinking. Bring it to a boil and let it cool. For those who love the seasonal taste of cider, pasteurized versions are widely available and taste very similar. When you buy juice, do you look for the pasteurization label? Or have you ever taken a chance on fresh-pressed juice at a market? Shifting gears, let's talk about one of the 2 items that actually are safe for seniors: canned beans. Affordable, shelf-stable, and protein-rich, beans are one of the rare grocery staples that consistently deliver nutrition without showing up in major recall lists. Kidney beans, black beans, chickpeas, pinto beans, The variety alone makes them versatile in everything from salads to soups. Unlike deli meats or soft cheeses, beans don't provide a friendly environment for pathogens once they've been processed and sealed. The canning process involves heating beans at high temperatures under pressure, which effectively kills harmful bacteria and locks the food into a sterile container. That's why canned beans are rarely recalled for contamination. There are, of course, small considerations. Excess sodium in canned beans can be a concern for seniors managing blood pressure, but rinsing the beans before use can cut sodium levels by nearly half. The payoff is worth it. Plant-based protein, fiber that supports digestive health, and minerals like iron and magnesium that older adults often lack in their diets. For seniors at higher risk of foodborne illness, canned beans are a game changer. Unlike fresh produce, they don't carry the same risks of E. coli or Listeria contamination. Unlike processed meat, they don't harbor bacteria that thrive in cold storage. And unlike plant-based alternatives, they aren't vulnerable to foreign object contamination from complex machinery. They're a simple, minimally handled product with a strong track record of safety. Here's a human angle. Many seniors living alone prefer foods that don't spoil quickly. A can of beans can sit in the pantry for months and still be ready to eat when needed. That stability reduces waste and saves money, which matters in households on fixed incomes. Beans don't just stretch the grocery budget, they stretch your safety margin too. When it comes to affordable protein, canned beans prove that sometimes the simplest choice is the safest. The second safe item worth highlighting is frozen vegetables, the unsung heroes of grocery aisles. While bagged salads and fresh berries often face recalls for bacterial contamination, their frozen counterparts are far less risky once cooked. Here's why. The freezing process stops bacterial growth. Most frozen vegetables are blanched, quickly boiled or steamed, before freezing, which reduces surface bacteria even further. Once packaged and kept at proper freezer temperatures, they remain safe until cooked. For seniors, this creates a much lower risk profile compared to fresh produce that may have traveled long distances and sat on shelves before purchase. Nutritionally, frozen vegetables hold up better than many assume. Studies show that flash freezing locks in vitamins and minerals, sometimes preserving them more effectively than fresh produce that spends days in transit. For seniors who need consistent sources of vitamin C, vitamin K, or fiber, frozen broccoli, spinach, and peas are reliable. Safety-wise, the biggest caveat is simple. Frozen vegetables should be cooked, not eaten straight out of the bag. Heating destroys any residual bacteria that might have survived the blanching and freezing process. That makes them far safer than bagged salads, which are often consumed raw and have been at the center of repeated Listeria and E. coli recalls. Think about the convenience factor. Frozen vegetables reduce prep time, cut down on food waste, and are available year-round. For seniors who may not be able to shop often or who tire quickly in the kitchen, this is a meaningful advantage. A bag of frozen green beans doesn't just deliver nutrients, it offers peace of mind that you're eating something safe. In a grocery landscape filled with recalls, the frozen vegetable aisle stands out as a rare safe zone. When cooked, frozen vegetables give seniors both the nutrition they need and the safety fresh produce often fails to guarantee. Don't let hidden dangers in the grocery aisle steal your health. Subscribe now. I'll help you separate the safe from the deadly.